You're welcome to my channel. My name is Caroline Abalo Okello. This space that you have connected to today is a space where we provide faith-based content for the marketplace. For you, the professionals out there, the business people out there, to see how you thrive in the marketplace without compromising your brand. You're welcome to my channel. This very moment, we want to share on something as explicit and simple as what the Christians would call the Elijah spirit. And why is the Elijah spirit very important in the marketplace? Before we even delve into the depth of this content, I want us to just describe the character behind Elijah and the kind of people Elijah interacted with. In this space, we interact with people like the character like Ahab. We see that Elijah interacted with characters like Jezebel. But also we can't speak about Elijah's period and not talk about a man called Naboth. So fast forward, what happened in the space where Elijah operated? I want us to just look into the history before Elijah comes to function. What kind of leader did we have in Ahab? And as we talk about Ahab, this is a real-time scenario that we deal with in the spaces where you and I operate in society and especially in the marketplace. Ahab represents any leader that occupies a position of authority but is not using their authority the way God has positioned leaders to dominate and thrive in the spaces of authority. Ahab represents the workplaces that you and I interact with that would have strong-willed subordinates that are called to a place of submission, like Jezebel, that without occupying a place of authority, they still make the decisions for you, but they will adamantly come out and say, it was the leader that said, it was my director that said, it was my president that said. But at the back end, we know that they have called the shots, because in the world we work in today, we have the controlling Jezebels that will take up spaces without even occupying the seat. This is for you, the business leader out there. This is for you, the manager in that space that has been leading an amazing team, that has been called in that place to actually let the people of God shine in the marketplace. But because the people that advise you have profiled themselves with a control spirit like the kind that Jezebel is, and why I say Jezebel is because we still have this spirit masquerading around the world today. And I feel it on the heart of the Father that if we must thrive on the mountain of economy, then we need to do something about the Jezebels of our time and allow Elijah to thrive. Talk about Ahab for us to backtrack a little bit. Who is Ahab? So Ahab is occupying the kingship mandate. But then Ahab is not making the decisions. Ahab is only signing the checks, is signing the appointments. But in the position of a leader, God is expecting you, the leader that has the Ahab spirit, to stand up to your game and not be advised by the choleric kind of personalities that we have in Jezebel, and yet you take the shame that come from the advice that you will give to the society out there today. I feel a hunger to just encourage someone out there that without you and I stepping out, we will continue grooming people into a space where leaders cannot speak for themselves. We will continue grooming people in a space where characters like the Jezebel can get away with anything. They can get away with tearing systems. They can get away with ill-advising leadership, because many times when decisions are made in many organizations that we have interacted with, you realize someone will say, I did not do this. My leader said I do this. But often at times we actually get to realize that the leaders had nothing to do about it. Someone ill-advised the system, and because of that, systems are collapsing, just like we saw the government of Ahab could not survive the test of time. So just with that background, and my belief is you and I are biblical scholars. You read your Bible and you're getting the picture of what exactly we are getting into. But because the primary purpose we want to talk about, why do we feel that it is important to raise Elijahs in the marketplace where you and I operate in? We have to then kill the Ahab spirit. We have to also kill the Jezebel spirit for Elijahs to thrive. What's so significant about Elijah? When we talk about Elijah, we talk about the Spirit of God. And it's the same as the Christ Spirit. When scriptures tell us through everything that we ever get to do, may we be guided by the norms and the doctrines of Scripture. It's pushing us to a place to be Spirit-led and to be not led by any other spirit, by the Spirit of Christ. And that's the hunger to just push forward the agenda for growing the Elijahs of our time. Now, this goes out to the subordinate out there. This goes out to the leaders, the managers, the CEOs, the country directors out there. There is a hunger on the mind of God that the marketplace to thrive, we can be able to make Jesus famous on this mountain, but we can't make Jesus famous if his spirit is not working within us. What is expected of you as a leader? If I could just fast forward, just give us a picture of how Christ led his team. We see Christ as a person who functioned from a place of prayer. He prayed for his team. At a time when one of his team members, and by Christ's team members, I'm talking about his disciples, when Peter was in a certain place, we hear Christ talking to Peter and saying, Satan tried to sift you like wheat, but I prayed for you, that when you strengthen, may you strengthen the brethren. But in the marketplace, how many leaders stand out and pray for their teams? That even when we see the teams operating from a place of weakness, how many times do we see a leader stepping out and praying and holding the hands of their teams? That's the hunger that we hear on the mind of God, that you and I can step out as the leaders that we are, to allow our teams shine, to allow our teams make it in the spaces that they would naturally have not made it. And there is so much weight in the power of prayer. Another thing we see about Elijah is Elijah was a man of warfare. Now, you can't be a leader without realizing that on this agenda, we are in constant war, constant battlefield. Now, that understanding enables you to position with the right weapons. You can't lead a team and you cannot survive in the battlefield. You can't say you're a leader and then you position yourself, because leadership is not about the title. There are people who can actually lead without having a title, and they will make the decisions in the spaces. The very reason we talk about Jezebel, she didn't have the leadership position as a king, but she was calling the shots in that space. And that is the thing we see in the everyday life, because a certain leader did not stand out in their space. A certain leader did not defend their team. Why I give this profound background? Because I know on the mind of God, leadership is just a leader accepting to be a servant. Servanthood is what we saw Christ profile us. Servanthood is what we saw Christ manifest to us. But how many times have we manifested as the servant leaders we are called to be? Now, what comes out when you talk about servanthood? You have to be able to guide your team. You have to be able to be vulnerable enough to align to the standards and make sure you're lifting the hands of your team to a point when you're actually understanding that on this agenda you're doing discipleship in the marketplace. When we talk about Jezebel and Ahab and Elijah, I want us to bring the people that God has called us to serve with in the workplaces. And these people, I'm going to only use one character in the Bible, and that is the character of Naboth. What happened to Naboth? We see Naboth had an inheritance from his father. And then we find leaders like Ahab saying, I want that vineyard. Now, Ahab in this place can represent the spirit of the serpent. The serpent spirit is hovering around each and every day and is also hungry to look for who to use. Ahab had everything as a king. I mean, the kingdom was his. But he still wants that one thing that does not belong to him. The devil is out there to take even what does not belong to him. Now, as Ahab is losing that space of control, of wanting more, that hunger to want more, we see Naboth saying, I cannot give you this vineyard because it's my inheritance, but also because from the mind of God, I have not been given the approval to hand you over this vineyard. But when we read our scriptures, we get to realize that when Ahab told Naboth he wanted that vineyard so he could plant there his vegetables, he did promise him that he can give him a better vineyard in another place. Now, the enemy can actually promise you something and guarantee that he's going to give you something better. When we think about just the promises the enemy makes and makes us think that he's giving us something better, think about at the story of creation, Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. The enemy, in his cunning nature, came out to Eve and said, did God really say? Now he's positioning Eve away from a place of promise, from a place of communion, from a place of sonship with the Father. Every time we compromise our identity in God, we lose our position. Every time we fail to raise Elijahs in our time, we lose our position. We lose our position with God. We lose our position in communion with God. We lose that place of conversation, like how God would just come to the garden in the cool of the day and communion with man. We lose that place every time we allow another spirit to take over. And that's where all the ill advice that comes in the spaces like the Ahabs will come in to try to speak to us that if you give me this, I can give you better. We have seen people compromising positions in the offices God has trusted them with. After we have given the amazing testimonies on what good the Lord has done for us, we occupy these seats and then we compromise our own vineyards. We are told if we sign this contract and you give me this back, I will give you a guarantee of future contracts in the future. We see that in the marketplace every day. Now, Naboth represents you and I that is working in these places every day. Naboth represents that subordinate on your team that has an inheritance that has been given to them by God, but they don't have the power, and someone is taking them away from that space. Okay, just like we are having this conversation about Naboth, and we are profiling Naboth from a place of this ordinary person we interact with every day, that subordinate on your team, that person that almost has no title by society's standards. They have something of value. But the people in leadership spaces are trying to take these things, these little things that could not even add much to what they already have. They desire of it. When you are a Naboth out there, it is very possible for you to compromise because you think you're getting favor from the senior leadership you have. You're trying to get favor from the manager that you have. You will give away your inheritance. And when you think about people who have lost their inheritance, we see a brother is profiled in the Bible to have lost his inheritance by just a plate of food. Some of us have given our destinies for just a plate of food, for just an extra promise of a contract that sometimes we don't even get. And that's the reality we face in the marketplace. At least in my country, that's what we experience. Probably you're watching us from another part of the continent, another part of the world, and you're wondering which world is that in the country where I come from. It's a reality that we actually interact with. Now, this is an encouragement for someone who has been feeling like they have been underlooked in the spaces where they work. They have been compromised in their positions, and you feel you have actually been profiling as a Naboth out there. This is the time God is actually positioning you that He is the one who has your destiny in His hands. This is a time for you to allow to carry on the spirit of Elijah, to get you to the place that has been promised you by God. You see, sometimes what has been promised you may look like gold, but not all that glitters is gold. Sometimes it looks like that's your lifting power, and probably it has been your long time prayer item, but you're not seeing it come to light, and a leader is promising you an opportunity, and you've sold away your birthright. You've sold away your birthright in the kingdom because you actually thought it's God's hand trying to position you. Not every time lifting that we see is coming from God. The enemy also in his craft is finding who to sway away from the reality. Now, I can't say that Naboth is all wickedness or all weakness in profiling. There is a trait that while we position for the Elijahs of our season, there is a trait of a Naboth we need to stand out and have a voice. When Ahab tried to compromise with Naboth, Naboth actually outrightly said, I will not give you this inheritance. I will not give you my vineyard. It is for the juniors out there, for the subordinates out there, that when you're positioned in a place of compromise, learn to gracefully say no. Learn to gracefully stand your position. Why do you need to gracefully do that? Because in a place of operating from a subordinate position, you run a risk of dishonoring. Now we need to differentiate what honor is and what compromising is, because many people in the marketplace, many people in society have actually compromised their identity in the understanding that they were honoring their leaders. Every time you find yourself in such a space, reconcile back with the heart of God. Reconcile back. What does your scripture tell you? Scripture doesn't tell us to honor our leaders when they're operating from a wrong place, when they're advising us away from the standards of God. So this is for you, the person in the marketplace. If your leader is telling you, if we sign this off, there is greatness that is coming our way, there is increase that is coming our way, but we know that it's not from the promise and the mind of God. This is the time you stand out, as Naboth was able to stand out and say, I will not hand over my vineyard to you. I will not give it to you, but gracefully. Because when you lose grace in this conversation, you could actually lose a life. You could actually end up in a termination. And that is exactly at this point where I want to bring in the Elijah. So what if Naboth was close to the likeliness of Elijah? What would he have done? He positioned in a place of prayer. He positioned in such a place that he knew when to pull the weapons of warfare. You see, the enemy can profile with so much that looks graceful, that looks beautiful. The promises that Ahab seemed to have seemed like it's all glitter, until the gods of Baal could not meet the needs of Jezebel and her husband. And we see the pride, the confidence with which Elijah came in defending the identity of God, that he knew his God as a God of response and response in time. That when a time of sacrifice came, no matter the circumstances, he knew he had a God that answers by fire. He knew a God that consumes a sacrifice and it goes to him as a sweet smelling aroma. This is the time not for a Naboth to step out and start discussing their leaders with their peers, with people that know their peers, on how bad they are, on how unkempt they are, on how unethical they are. Because in the place of those conversations, sometimes it will not come in your favor. Sometimes that's how Naboths lose their positions. Sometimes that's how Naboths lose their vineyards. Why? Because after you've gotten a place of conversation, we get back and start having interactions with other people. We start profiling our leaders. And remember, you're dealing with someone that has the spirit you do not want. You're dealing with someone who has a spirit of manipulation. They will see you out of that space. So if you are an Elijah, and we said the Elijah spirit is the spirit of Christ, every time people tried to compromise Jesus, he sent them back with a question. We see every time people wanted Christ to make a decision on something or to vouch for his words to have been the reason they made a certain decision. In the event there was a malfunction in society, look at the time when we look at Christ left in a place of passing judgment for the prostitute, and they came before the Pharisees and the scribes came before Christ and asked questions. But the intelligence of Christ did not even allow him to give his position. He allowed them to close their positions based on their understanding of the law. This is where you and I in the marketplace should be able to challenge and say, what does policy say? So that it is not your voice that is vouched out because you made a certain decision. That at that time, if we are to be the Elijahs, the Christ spirit in us to thrive in our season, then we have to come to that place where, as we stand for what is right, we don't compromise our identity. As we stand for what is right, we lift others with us. We don't run away from assignment. I pick this because we actually realize that in the place of assignment, when Elijah was threatened a little bit, Elijah actually ran from assignment and went into hiding because Jezebel had shouted. Jezebel had made noise. What could have been the right thing to do? We see Christ never ran from assignment. Christ stayed on assignment up to the time when we were getting to the mountain. When we were getting to that place when crucifixion was to happen, he didn't run away from his assignment. So this is for you and I in the marketplace, that we get to understand our assignment in this place, that we are here to make Jesus famous on the mountain of influence. We are here to make Jesus known. But the Christian body of today, when we get to the marketplace, we thank God for the answered prayer. Then we think that's where the assignment ends, that he has given us the job. We are not promoting Christ in that place. We are not realigning the leaders who are like Ahabs in the marketplace to actually streamline. I have been coached by a leader. One of my mentors has always taught me that if you need to shine in any place, may you be the staff that prays for your leader. For you don't know the forces they're struggling with. You don't know the forces that actually attack them every day. And when these forces attack, they could just land on you as a bait. So we are called in that place to be the intercessors for our leaders, that we realign them to the purposes of God. You see, like how Christ prayed for Peter, that when the enemy tried to swift him like wheat, he prayed for him. May we be the type that strengthen our leaders. You see, leadership, I speak this from a place of being a leader. Leadership is the most lonely space you can ever be in. Now, everyone is hungry to say, when I become a leader, I will do this. But leadership spaces are the most lonely spaces. And if you don't have someone that prays with you and prays for you, then it can just be hell on earth for someone that is actually operating from that space. Now, every leader wants a team member, someone on their team that prays with them, someone on their team that checks on them. Maybe, just maybe, could that be the reason Elijah ran away? Because he didn't have a team that could hold his hand in prayer. He didn't have a team that could tell him, Jezebel is just threatening you. She is not going to do anything. He didn't have a team, so he was a one-man's army. Except for having God, he was a one-man's army. You see, the journey was easier for Christ to even go on the cross because someone accompanied him there. Sometimes in the place of crucifixion, you need someone to accompany you there. So this is also a call for the leaders out there. You cannot be the all-know-it-all. You can't be the one that makes all the decisions. You need your team. You need the Naboths to pray with you. You need someone to surround you. That's why we are on a discipleship journey. We disciple men to become who we are in the spaces that we occupy. And because we disciple men, they become our replica. They start transferring. I like telling people that if there is any project that has been implemented in life that is a most successful script that I know of, I like to think of a business model as Christ's model. And that is the model of discipling nations, spreading the gospel unto the nations. This is the man that only did his work for 3 years. And after 3 years, 2,000 years later, you and I are still making him famous even today on a mountain like this one. So I'd like to tell people, if you're looking for a typical business script to go by, then your Bible is the basic standard that you need to go with. Because when you look at the life of Jesus, he mentored his team right. He prayed with his team right. There were times when the storms came. He stayed with them in the boat. There is where the leader rises up when the team has lost hope. The storms seem to be so high up there. And we see Jesus just standing up in the authority that he had and spoke to the storm. You as the leader, you are the voice. You're the one that breathes life. Just imagine why Christ was resting in that boat and that storm came. Supposing he also woke up scared, what would happen to that team? For this was their master. So how many times as leaders in our space of influence, where the Lord has put us in to function from, when calamity comes, when storms come, we also cry with the team because the storm has come. We have to stand in our authority to actually speak to the storm to end. That's how we lift the Christ spirit in us, that we understand the storms will come, that we will understand that the Jezebels will come, we will understand that the Ahabs will come. But you and I can actually allow Christ to thrive in the marketplace. You and I can make him have identity, because at the moment, I think where Christ sits on the throne, it feels like we take him back to the cross every day. Every time we compromise in leadership, we take Christ back to the cross. Every time we steal people's vineyards because we want get quick rich schemes, we probably think by getting kickbacks from the people that we work with, we'll actually build our mansions faster. We take Christ back to the cross. And yet he already paid that debt for us. Now it's for you and I to stand out in our positions of authority and say, Christ, we are going to defend your identity to the very end. This is my sharing with you today. I hope to interact with you again. Keep connected with us on this channel as we download the kingdom mysteries on how we can shine on the mountain of economy. Be blessed.